Their Sandbag Casuals XL segment with the 2MK team. Today, Just Fine is going to be playing Yuzuriha in Under Night in Birth X latest. And we're going to be giving our usual talk about this game, minor mechanics in it, repeating stuff that we have said in every other stream because it's important to repeat yourself occasionally. And then, of course, focusing in on more specific stuff. So as always, we are just taking a bunch of matches. We had fixed it so that we probably won't have the problem we had last time with the sharing issues and so on. We have no idea how many people we're going to end up fighting against today, but we expect the stream to follow its usual flow. You would have seen Just Fine play this game before, so this is not a Sandbag Casuals XL where the player has generally not touched the game in ranked or similar. But last time you saw her play, she would have been playing Mika, which is quite a different concept to playing Yuzuriha. This character is a lot about being very calm and spacing yourself until you get an opening, or if you know your opponent is trying to get in and you can stay out of their main attack range, counter-striking at them during that. But that depends a lot on matchup. So, on that note, matchups. Lin generally wants to get in. Lin doesn't have a whole lot of options against Yuzu without getting in. But, similar to how we've said many times, in order to get in on these full screen space control-y zoners, sometimes you need to take yourself a lot of space backward and then make your approach from there, which seems to be helping them so far. But of course, once you've recognized that's what's going on, the deciding factor will be the speed of your character's attacks. And whether or not you defend should be decided primarily by that. Yuzu, however, has some specific methods of dealing with this when the opponent has gone back to full screen. They're risky, but unlike most zoners, she has more options. She can use her stances and dash to get quickly to the other side of the opponent as they're making their approach. Depending on who she's fighting, this may or may not be really helpful. And the second thing, obviously, she can do is use her leaping... I don't actually know what that move is called. The flowery one. On reaction to a ton of attacks, but the timing is really specific. And it doesn't stop anyone approaching from the ground. So, it's the usual situation. If you can get yourself to watch the opponent enough and carefully decide at the last moment which of your defensive reactions to have, you can manage. And if you flinch, get scared or bothered, or any of those negative reactions to being pressured or feeling like your opponent is about to get in and pressure you, if you flinch, most likely that is what will happen and your life will be miserable.
So let's see if I can do a little better at the not flinching part.
As always, we mention how Vorpal works, how the repelling attack works, and so on. The repelling attack in this game is basically a quarter circle back with the D button, and it requires you to have 2 meters of Vorpal in order for it to work, meaning that you generally don't want to wait until too late in your opponent's pressure string or block string to do this. If you are a character that was not necessarily all that good at keeping your opponent out, and as soon as they hit you, basically, you should do this, because every time they push on you with their pressure, it is slowly using up that meter. So your hope, generally, and it's part of the whole mix-up of the game, so you will get hurt for doing it sometimes. Your general hope is, as soon as you see the opponent get into a space that you didn't want them to get into, you flinched and had to block, go directly for this move, especially if you've been successful thus far and therefore had any Vorpal to use for the purpose. You really want to get them off you again as quickly as possible. The difficulty here is, of course, managing to be calm enough to just block one attack, or 2 attacks, because sometimes you don't get it until the second, but you should still have enough Vorpal probably to push them off you at that point, presuming things haven't been going too poorly. This is something you have to do from the very beginning, and you have to lock it into your mind really early. If you don't do this, you will not have enough Vorpal to do it after the first knockdown or mix-up most of the time, meaning that you will have to use it and break your own Vorpal gauge and be unable to do it again, so you must take control of the match in that case, and so on. Therefore, whereas in other games we normally are tempted to feel, well, I should defend my way out of this situation. No, you get to deny your opponent their advantage from getting in once, and if you failed at it, you're going to have some trouble. Seth is another character who will put up the more or less the same effect, really.
All of the mix-ups. You said quarter circle back, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Not sure what was wrong with my timing or something then.
I'll double check it. I remember being confused by it because it isn't actually the normal thing that people use for that, as far as I'm aware. It's usually the V reversal style, forward and some amount of buttons, or the alpha counter style, back to down and the button. So I will hope it is not back to down and I have it wrong.
But yes, overall with this type of character, there's a few games where I've played similar style characters, I tend to need to focus on the spacings I need to stand at a lot more than when is a good idea to hit this button or such, or how can I get the most advantage, because I play these sorts of characters somewhat defensively, but part of their toolset is to be threatening while standing at a certain space. And therefore they don't have to attack in order to assert a offensive pressure. They just hold their stance, and that stance makes the other player think.
This brings us back to what we've been discussing this week generally. The realization that there are some characters whose block strings, attacks, and similar are actually all just setups to make you want to react in a particular way so that they get to do the next thing. Of course, there's no easy way to recognize this for the most part, so you just do your best.
Very long arms. In a game
One
that
easy way to deal with this is just to jump whenever you feel your opponent wanted you to hit a button, and hit a button whenever you think they wanted you to jump, and see what happens, basically. You can actually see the effect here. The opponent will generally eventually try to beat your unorthodox play with something slightly less dangerous. After all, When a player is fighting a new opponent who they don't know the defensive capability of, their best bet is generally to go for the thing that has the confirm into the biggest damage so that they can end the round as quickly as possible. At the very least, therefore, you can force them to use a different sort of mix-up or different sort of approach.
I love how far forward her scarf type moves move her. They set up such good spacing. Ah, this guy again. Enkidu, I mean. That has a thinner hitbox than I would have thought.
Part of the strength of this type of character is they're usually able to confirm fairly well off of their standing moves. We see it in Baiken, we see it in Bison and Mika, we see it in the other Mika, and Yuzuriha is no exception. She is generally balanced, however, by the fact that of the space control characters, her moves are among the slowest. Meaning that for most people, she doesn't really feel so much like a zoner as she is a preemptive space control character. She can keep you from entering a certain space because that's part of her plan, but as a reaction to you moving, it's less effective. Similar to, again, Axel, but these attacks that are able to strike very far in front of her are even slower than Axel's. What she does have as a good option, though, unlike Axel, is a few faster attacks for when the opponent is convinced, okay, I can get through you because you keep on using the slow ones. She can just use normals and hit them instead, rather than actually going for specials. In short, if you realize you keep on using your specials and they miss and the opponent is getting in, especially if you're doing the air ones, just jump and hit your long air button instead. It particularly helps that in this game, the thing we're used to in Guilty Gear Gatling combo, that style actually works the opposite way. The game does not care whether or not you hit your lightest button first, or even specifically that you go in an order. All it cares about is that you use all three rather than trying to use any given one. Meaning that every character in the game has the option to go CBA or CAB depending on whether or not they're at the range where that will work as a combo, and it will work as a chain cancel just as with anything else. This flexibility means that if you have a character whose better option button to start their situation is either B or C, you don't have to give up anything or hope that the A will work. This is not generally all that meaningful, but if your character has a B or C that moves them forward, it may pull them into range required to do the next thing.
Should have walked back. But that's the sort of thing I actually need to learn. So, good stuff. I feel like I should be able to, like, reflect projectiles with this orb, but it seems to just be getting me hit. Or with the scarf thing, I mean. But that might just be me playing Rose too much. I'll try a little more though. She has a really long low. Woo, it's projectile invincible. What?
In general, games that have very far out footsies like these don't offer very long overheads, meaning that most of the time the balance in the game and the reason you want to block low all the time is so that your opponent doesn't hit you, but their benefit from making you want to block all the time is of course that you're not repositioning yourself, you're not walking, you're not shifting out of the range of their attacks to then whiff punish them. So they do get some benefit from this idea of continually trying to hit with lows in such a way that it will make you want to stay crouching and not actually move and keep your defense up that way.
I tried to perfect guard for some reason. I don't even know if that's a thing in this game, honestly. Is it?
No.
Dang. Guilty Gear, muscle memory. Oh well.
Understanding your air normals in this game is a little bit more required than many others simply because they often are long and because of the assault button allowing you to move forward in the air in ways the opponent might not be immediately watching for. Therefore, you can go for max range, jump into assault into stuff, instead of having to deal with it the other way. Running jumps have a different flow to them, but use still a little of that as well. You can't do it as quickly, instantly as you can in games like King of Fighters, but you still get something out of it. So understanding exactly how to hit people and the maximum range of your jumping attacks becomes more and more important. Obviously your opponent can defend, but a lot of this is important because if they've reached the point where they had to block the move, they normally don't have any good punishes for it. Especially if you manage to hit it at the right height. For many characters, their jump back normals are similarly powerful, but just like in other games, you're looking for a specific type to hit your opponent when they jump into the air with you, rather than one for hitting them where they stand.
And my persistence has shown me that I can indeed counter something. Maybe it's everything and not just projectiles, who knows? Ah, anti-air supers. How I love thee. Ooh, he can grapple out of that. Well, that just makes this a pain.
If you had been fighting to the point where you had at least some chance of winning in Vorpal, or just could stay up with the opponent in general, you can generally expect that they'll be using a relatively long move, sometimes a low, sometimes not, to go for you directly on your wake up, as this is just advantageous in almost all situations. If properly spaced, almost every running low in this game, while not necessarily real pressure, is at least enough to keep people from moving. But we are back to that high level Seth. Or high rank point Seth anyway. You can see here that in that situation, well, a little while back actually, there was just enough Vorpal to get out of Seth's mix-ups and stuff. This is also partially why this player, having a lot of experience, treats almost all opponents the same and therefore goes for the throw on the run up knowing that they expect to need to block and then do the repelling attack. As we mentioned before, the easiest way to solve most of this is backdash on your own wake up. Depending on the opponent, you may be able to get quite a lot of that. You can jump out of some of them, the lows and similar that I mentioned before. Especially if you jump forward, it can sometimes be helpful for many reasons. And beyond that, mostly you should look at your opponent's tendencies to see what you can do with your normals.
Phew, that was actually fun. He's very hard to keep track of due to how much bouncing around he's capable of. But overall, I felt like once I got in my own attacking flow, I was able to maintain spacings where Seth couldn't just cut me because he felt like it, or put me in a mix-up situation without a little more setup. Oof, those left-right mix-ups are so hard to do, though. Or block, I mean. And I blinked for 1 second. And completely lost track of him.
You're not supposed to blink when you're fighting Seth. Come on, you can
Oh,
be behind
yes.
that.
Well, obviously it was my mistake there.
Having bodily functions.
Oh, man. That's so fun, though. I'm really appreciating the way Yuzu's block strings work. It's like, oh, I'm sorry. Did you want to, like, attack? No, I'm sorry. I'm right above your head. Never mind. It's not really your turn. Makes me feel like Bison, except with, like, air stuff. What? Ah, this character is so weird as he looks.
Now, obviously, it'd be tempting to just think of Merkava as offensive Dalsim, but he's not really that. He's closer to Piccolo, honestly. The result is, however, that he's very neutral jumpable.
So I've
He
been
really
noticing.
lacks a lot of strong stuff to do when you do that to him. Partially because his approaches are relatively slow. If Yuzum wants to be on the offensive, she can basically neutral jump when she doesn't know what to do, and when she feels as if, hey, maybe you're at that spacing, then just go for the standard Rose Bloom style attack, as it goes through and beats a ton of his stuff.
What? Did I just get kidnapped? What a weird thing. I don't even know if to call it a person, honestly, although it looked like it was talking or something. I don't know. Also, apparently, Yuzume's or Yuzume, Yuzuriha's um, air attack, light air attack, has like insane cross up ability and can chain into her like auto combo and stuff. Like I was crossing up at the weirdest times. It's like alright. That'd probably be hard to use her entire stance while against this character, given how long his frickin' reach is. Stop that, please. Thank you.
There's that sneaky low again.
Yeah. If I had to guess as to how that match is supposed to go, though, I don't think as Yuzu I would need to be that obsessed with avoiding his really long attacks. Because, I mean, her range isn't actually that much shorter than his. I'm not sure what his mobility is like, given the way that player was playing, but I'd expect it'd be slightly less than Yuzu. Also, I love that attack. I continue to love that attack. Mars, Seth, good stuff.
Back to facing this same Seth, yes.
Well, given you are a Seth player, can he just keep doing that mix-up thing?
That's not a mix-up, you're just kind of slower than
Oh.
some people, and there's no real reason to stand there. Your thought is generally, I'm going to block. But you've gone through this discussion with me before. If you put yourself in a situation where you are continually blocking, and I have one of my characters who actually gets to just keep on hitting buttons indefinitely and it will never be your turn, then usually I will do that. I'm not saying you shouldn't just block sometimes, probably could just block for a very long period, given that, in a way, this helps you build up enough Vorpal, because when Seth is doing that, it's a little bit interesting the way Vorpal works in the game as a whole, but when Seth is doing left, right, and other weird mix-ups, he tends to not build too much Vorpal of his own, and yours doesn't go down really, compared to where it could have been. So there is a cost to that constant movement trying to open someone up. For Seth and I think Nanase both have that little flaw.
I see.
At which point you could just decide, okay, I'm done with this now. I'm either going to jump out, or if I'm really intent on it, I will just repel you, and that will solve the problem. However, if Seth gets ahead of you in Vorpal, he has no reason to stop doing this because he's literally just running a timer until he gets Vorpal advantage. And then yay.
Not sure why my Vorpal broke, but maybe it has something to do with the way Veil Off works.
It's also partially because, as I've noted before, this player likes to throw and try to break your guard and a lot of other things because they're fairly aware that if you just keep on beating people up with Seth that way, you won't necessarily be able to win. You do have to throw in some other stuff. You can't just make people block forever and expect it to work out.
Also, Yuzu's medium air attack is super long. Much to my appreciation. So, Even though her walk speed is bad, if you don't feel like running for some reason, you can probably just forward jump and medium and be fine. Or B in this game. Right, I should be actually using their terminology. I mean, look how beautifully long that is. I guess my adaptation I need to make psychology-wise or mindset-wise is that defense in this game actually is attacking.
No, not really. It's that the game is full of characters who are all functionally Karini. You're very used to a game where the general way that mix-ups are done is that the opponent hits buttons and then eventually hits a certain thing in block and you have to deal with that thing. Command grabs often obviously set this up. Jumping over for easy cross-up sets this up. And so on. But this game isn't really so heavily based on that. It's much more about making sure that when your opponent is at a certain range, you know whether or not you want to move. Now, this is actually how Guilty Gear plays, but not when you're playing it.
I see.
For example, this Akatsuki is hitting buttons and keeping you under control by those button hits. But you could backdash out at any time because backdashes are invincible, so just leave.
Wait, fully invincible?
Fully invincible.
Oh. That changes a few things.
I should have reminded at the beginning of stream. But yes, backdashes in this game are fully invincible, which is why you backdash on wake up, which is why you backdash when you don't know what else to do in neutral. Which is why people say this is the anime of Street Fighter 4, for example. Not many people are saying that, there's just a couple of people I've heard say that. But it is certainly a game that people who enjoy Street Fighter 4 and don't hate anime games tend to be very fond of. Because they love their defensive options. And the option selects that beat these defensive options.
I see.
But I'll try to make sure that anything else I forgot to restate that I do within the next couple. Make sure we're not missing anything.
Yeah, invincible backdash would have never occurred to me. That's slightly a foreign concept, although I think it's
actually
slightly
amazing
familiar.
that it is. Because so many more games had it for a while than not. Because Guilty Gear backdashes are invincible. You just never backdash, so it never occurs to you.
Hey, now, I've backdashed sometimes, but I didn't know that. So, noted for Tuesday train, I guess.
The main thing, therefore, is to make sure that you use the attack to push your opponent off so that you don't get cornered, and therefore, so that you can use the backdash as you need to. This is particularly useful for Yuzu because she doesn't really mind if she gets pushed back to a corner. She only needs to land one hit when the opponent challenges her to get a cross-up style combo, one that she doesn't even have to hope that the knockdown works and she jumps through. And if the opponent decides, well, okay, I'm going to stay over here and try to corner guard you, she's literally impossible to corner guard as a character. You can make sure you hit her on the way out, but as a character, she is functionally impossible to corner guard. Vorpal isn't necessarily supposed to be part of one's meter watching, though. Vorpal is actually something similar to Guilty Gear Tension, where you are supposed to feel whether or not you have enough Vorpal for something based on how you've been moving thus far. She's also therefore one of the characters who can afford to use her Vorpal and let the Vorpal get broken, as the Vorpal does not cease to build up while it's broken, while that part of the gauge is broken. It's just unusable. Meaning that if you feel as if you're going to be able to control the match after the repelling attack for long enough for it to recover, you should just go for it and use it anyway, despite the Vorpal break. For short-range characters, this is usually a poor idea because they don't have enough ways to get control, and the opponent will generally shift to a more offensive stance, get in on them quickly, and so on. But for characters like Yuzu, there's no real reason not to do it. She can definitely hold control, especially against certain characters, long enough to make this not a thing that she cares about. Therefore, blocking is not really your friend. Don't do it unnecessarily. She's very good at defending and blocking, but she's not a character who wants to be blocking for long periods. But any sword person can tell you that. Blocking for long periods is usually a way to die. At least in sword fights.
Yeah,
Martial
that's
arts,
true.
you could grab something.
I mean, you can, like, parry, but that's not really blocking. That's hitting the thing out of the way. So, point taken, I should take my kendo background to heart here. Well, I've been appreciating the general pool of people I've gotten to play, so. Maybe I should forward dash in that situation.
The other good thing about the backdash response is that if you are at the end of what looks like a block string from your opponent, backdashing out is probably a good idea. If you misjudge it and you're one move too early, it's often, interestingly, that you will not only manage to get away, you may be able to punish them before they can recover from whatever move they were planning to hit. Even standard long normals have this.
And it looked like my dash forward instinct was correct, so good stuff.
With Gordo, the situation gets a little more complicated. He's easy to evade if you have enough time to jump into the air and then go for your longer strike, but you should generally move forward when you do this to prevent him from being able to use certain attacks. He does have options for attacking the space that you would jump up into, so you do always have to worry. There isn't any real way to just not have to deal with anything he does. But understanding that you can often neutral jump out of his stuff, as with a lot of stuff in this game, is at least enough to help you get to keep a pace with him and not have to worry so much about being stuck on the ground blocking all of his various side slashes.
I see.
As a character, he has only one real option for that space, other than approaching you. So if you have the skill to just jump straight up and somewhat reactively do what you need to do. This is something we were also discussing earlier in terms of reacting to negative space. Doing this thing because your opponent has not yet done anything. Rather than instantly acting, you take a moment, and if you saw them not do anything for a certain amount of time, take your action immediately. But the important thing is to delay yourself just long enough to make sure that you're not falling into a trap, and to make them worry that you won't do it every time. think the fight with Hyde would be relatively straightforward, but it is not because he is the character, well, among the characters that is strongest at shutting down her neutral jump game. She has to fight from much further away and use more of her specials. Fortunately, among the characters that can get in on her easily and get a big damage off it, he's not in that set, meaning that you can more safely do that. But it is a little counterintuitive if you've been playing most of the rest of the cast, given that if you neutral jump, Hyde will hurt you.
Forward jump, though, seems to be okay.
Forward jump does work relatively well in situations. Hyde does not generally want to hit buttons too early into the air. And he does lose some of his movement options there too, but should still be a little careful of it as he does have normals he can use. It's just that doing so sacrifices a ton of damage on his jump-ins, meaning that you can get him into that mindset, and similar to how I will eventually get people to jump in on Colleen because they think I'm going to try to counter, you can similarly get Hyde to jump in on you without launching a real strong attack or pushing out one of his bigger buttons that has a lot of space control, simply because you've met him in the forward jump so often. As you can see there, he doesn't really actually get to do much damage if he's constantly trying to jump in with buttons that counter her forward jump. Getting him into the habit of jumping even more makes it just simple to anti-air.
Well, that sort of game certainly makes the air game a little more interesting to me. So maybe I'll get to play them again and get to test out a few more things.
And Kido is a problem because once you get close to him, and he manages even one counter style attack or a really strong defense, he has just enough range and really good confirms off of his range to make sure that if you had to block even one of his attacks, you're going to be blocking for a while. This is similar to trying to get in on characters like Sagat and similar things in Street Fighter V, where your best bet is to use your repel attack not as a defense tool, but rather as an offense tool to help you keep control when you have failed your offense in some small way. Your opponent is generally not going to be thinking about things like setting up throws. Offensive players think about those things because they're concentrating on breaking your defense. This sort of player is watching for when you have messed up something and it's now their turn, and they're just going to keep on hitting buttons to resolve the situation. Especially if they have a long chain that they know will push you back to a place where they have control. So you can deny them that control by using up some of your Vorpal to do it. Especially if you aren't near the point where the Vorpal is about to roll over, or if you weren't going to win Vorpal anyway. Since sitting through your opponent's long block string when you're about to lose Vorpal is probably the worst option. This is also likely to make the opponent more frantic and stressed in a lot of situations because they don't really know whether or not it's a good idea to do something. Mid-screen, this is stressful. Far out, this is stressful. Just the idea that, I should just follow my muscle memory, but every time I do that I get surprised or confused, or the opponent somehow seems to have control of the situation in a way I don't expect because I'm not watching hard enough. Taking that moment of comfort away from them is a strong psychological tactic.
Yeah, I'm really liking this air A attack. Ah, okay, I see. So it's more like a counter than it is reflect or whatever. Got it. So the reason I keep getting hit when I do it from close is it'll do the counter attack, but I'm vulnerable during that. So I need to be careful of the opponent tricking me into using my counter when they are just at max range, enough to avoid the counter attack, probably. But that's like a super far off there sort of thing. But it's the sort of thing I like to think about, so. Ooh, a Mika.
Well, this is where your own experience will have to come in. You can't expect too much from me. Other than, obviously, automatic things I've already been saying. She's definitely another one of those characters like Enkidu, though, where if you want to hold control against her, she has a lot of nice strings that keep you in place. But in her case, it's even more dangerous because, obviously, you don't know at what point of that string the player has managed to get some massive amount of skill that will let them pull the command grab out. So you just want them away from you as quickly as possible. And as always, in the case of characters who have this particular thing, as soon as possible, is often because of the setup required for such a grab. In games like Street Fighter, you don't really want to immediately do it. You want to be able to say, well, I should backdash out of this, or I should read the situation and jump out or whatever if the opponent seems to be going for what we call a tick throw. But this game's throws have different timings and ranges, and the tick system for it is a little bit weaker, so you don't generally expect that to be the reason. The opponent is more so likely to make you feel that you're going to be blocking for a quite long time, and then violate that expectation, and hope that you don't notice in time to even tech out. Or even more interestingly, hope that you see them move forward without hitting more buttons, go for a strike of your own, and just stick your hurt box into their throw.
Overall, it looked like this Mika at least didn't quite know how to take advantage of the fact that I was automatically using a bunch of Yuzu's air special stuff that can just flat out avoid Mika's command grab, so there's definitely ways, but it requires you to use the whiff punishing dash punching attack thing. I really should know the name of this, but I haven't really looked at the command list in a while.
We play far too many fighting games to know the names of moves in
Yeah.
general, and people like to give moves some really spectacular names and then not have the character yell out the name of the move.
It's true.
Sure, it's cheesy when we do it in certain situations, but that's usually only because the name of the move is too long to begin with.
Looks like I picked the right training partner for today.
Well, you say that, but you're like near the end of stream.
True. But out of the characters I fought today, other than the weird one whose name escapes me, Noodly Arms, I've basically understood their general flow, but Batista, it feels like she has a lot more weirder options.
does have good range. It's a massive oversimplification to say she's like fighting Guile.
Well, I mean, she just did a
But
flash kick, so...
it is probably the best place I can start in terms of your understanding of the character as someone who comes from Street Fighter. But it might be better to say that she's like Leo, but with zoning.
Ah, yeah, I can see that.
Well, it's not even that Leo doesn't have zoning, it's just really weak relative to most of the other things Leo likes to do. For those who are not familiar with many fighting games, that is Leo Whitefang of Guilty Gear. A character that has been a thorn in the side of many since he was introduced. Due to his good left, right, and high-low mix-up game at close range.
So, from my testing, it looks like Yuzu's C air is more so for when opponents are advancing on her, and her forward B is more so forward air B is for when she wants to either neutral jump or forward jump and cause the opponent to flinch. And honestly, both of those situations kind of like are obvious, at least to me, in terms of spacing for most of them. Unless they're running, apparently, she has...
Well, the good part about that is if the opponent has gotten to the point of thinking they can just run straight at you, that is when her regular space control slashes come into their element and really mess people up.
Indeed. That being said, this person was being a pain. And I was not using... Well, I tried doing the reversal, but it was not working.
And I think they read the moment when you do it. As we always tell people, your opponent is in the same mindset as you when you're in the same situation. So, unless you're relatively practiced to the point where you could just decide it more or less out of the blue, the time you decide to finally do something different is around the same time your opponent has realized, oh, they're about to do something different, leading to that sort of interaction happening fairly often. But as always, our XL streams are not in fact extra long.
Yes, thank you for watching. Tomorrow we have our Kame House Dragon Ball Fighter lobbies. Beginners are welcome. And on Friday, I believe we have more Dead or Alive Lounge as well for you to join if you so desire. Both of these will be East Coast, but we don't mind lag too much depending on the type, so feel free to try. On Monday, we will be having our Street Fighter Mishmashing Battle Lounge. And you can join Rune Siren and the others for that. And on Tuesday, that brings us to our aforementioned Guilty Gear Tuesday Train stream, where we will be having a beginner and, well, honestly, mostly intermediate now, although we do tend to get some beginners. And that brings us to Wednesday, where it is still a little undecided. So, thank you for watching, everyone. This has been Just Fine and Brilliant for Team 2MK, signing out.